truly humble under God. That's what thug means.
I plead the fifth.
This court holds you in willful contempt. If you don't tell me how you got the information, I'm going to hold you in contempt.
Judge Juror Glanville is no longer the judge presiding over this case.
I take full responsibility for, my crimes.
I want you to try to be more of the solution and less of the problem.
The longest trial in Georgia history, the YSL RICO trial, has finally come to a close after years of legal battles, courtroom delays, multiple plea deals, including one that led to Young Thug's release. With the case against the remaining co-defendants now over, we're going to talk with some of the jurors as we take a look back at the key moments that define this very complex trial. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. Jesse Weber. The high-profile, lengthy RICO trial that began against the rapper Young Thug and his 5 co-defendants has officially ended, officially bringing the longest trial in Georgia history to a close. This legal saga of the YSL RICO trial began back in 2022 when Thug, whose real name is Jeffrey Lamar Williams, alongside several co-defendants, was charged in a sprawling case that connected him to these violent activities of Young Slime Life, YSL, a group that prosecutors argued was a criminal street gang. Prosecutors had accused Williams of being the leader of this criminal enterprise that was behind a series of violent crimes. They said it was murder, attempted murder, robbery, drug trafficking. Defense lawyers, though, had a different take. They countered that YSL wasn't a gang, but it was a record label, Young Stoner Life, and it was just a network of artists and friends who portrayed a tough gangster image in the music to reflect their life experiences, but they weren't criminals. By the time the trial finally kicked off in November of last year, though, Young Thug was left to stand trial along with now just 5 other co-defendants. There was a whole multitude of reasons why the other ones, their cases were severed, they took deals, but he was tried with 5 other co-defendants, and that was Diamante Kendrick, Shannon Stillwell, Rodalius Ryan, Quamarvius Nichols, and Marquavius Huey. And in a trial that was plagued by delays and interruptions, many of the most tense and heated moments actually happened outside of the jury's presence. Like this moment when a voice was heard on the courtroom Zoom feed of a person yelling for a mistrial.
Free fuck, mistrial! Free fuck, mistrial!
Or how about this moment when Diamante Kendrick's attorney, Doug Weinstein, motioned to limit the state's witnesses?
We are losing our jurors. I look over there at them and they are trying their best. They are trying their hardest. Often they are taking notes, but other times they have just tuned out.
And there were numerous arguments over rulings.
As the court has said, by law enforcement until an attorney has been made available or until the suspect reinitiates the conversation.
Your Honor, at some point, Your Honor,
I'm sorry, I'm talking, and I don't know why I am being interrupted. I will not stop. Your Honor. I was the one speaking before Mr. Weinstein interrupted.
But you continually engage in this pattern of behavior, Ms. Love. You don't want to accept my ruling.
Your Honor,
I know you're being an advocate, but at some point, stop.
And even attempts to recuse the trial's first judge, Judge Earl Glanville.
I make a motion to ask you to please recuse yourself. You're yelling at me in front of a jury for nothing, and then you won't apologize. And I did nothing wrong, ever.
And let's not forget when Young Thug's attorney, Brian Steele, told the jury what the name Young Thug really means.
It was his pact that if he could ever make it as a musical artist and help his family, himself, and as many others out of this endless cycle of hopelessness, he would be truly humble under God. That's what thug means.
And more memorable moments also came from the state's lineup of their supposed star witnesses, many of whom, by the way, were alleged associates of YSL or former co-defendants. And one of those witnesses was Adrian Bean, an alleged getaway driver for a 2013 robbery that he claimed Young Thug was involved in. Although the most memorable part of his testimony is probably when he admitted on the stand to being under the influence.
And I asked you, the authorities, the police, the prosecutors, I just made it broad, that they forced Jeffrey Williams into it. Did you hear you say that?
Man, can I get a water or something? I'm so high right now, y'all. I'm about to go to sleep on y'all now. I ain't gonna tell you no lie.
Yes, you may. We're going to take a break soon.
Now, if you thought that was something, we of course cannot have a true recap of star witnesses without mentioning probably the most infamous witness of the trial, Kenneth Lil Woody Copeland. Now, he was deemed the state's star witness, or at least that was one way he was portrayed, but he was less than cooperative when he first took the stand.
How old are you?
Grown.
Okay, what does grown mean?
I'm an adult.
Okay. And when you say you're an adult, what number in years are you?
I plead the fifth.
Mr. Copeland, given the fact that you have invoked your Fifth Amendment privilege, but the state has already given you immunity under 24-5-507, this court holds you in willful contempt.
Hey, by the way, before we go any further, I have to thank Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring today's Law&Crime YouTube takeover. Here's the truth. One of the most unpredictable things in life is if you get injured. That comes out of nowhere. And Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm, that may be who you want on your side, because you know what? Your case could be worth millions of dollars. Morgan & Morgan, they have over 1,000 attorneys. They have a proven track record of winning big. Recently, they secured verdicts of $12 million in Florida, $26 million in Philadelphia, $6.8 million in New York, all far exceeding insurance offers in these cases. And even if your case isn't worth 7 figures, why not start a claim and get the money you deserve? And starting a claim is so easy. It takes 8 clicks or less. It can be done right from your smartphone, and it's free unless you win. So if you're hurt, visit forthepeople.com/YouTube takeover or click the link in the description and pinned in the comments. Now, here's the thing. Despite what was clearly a rough start, Copeland ended up being a very important character in this case. Why? Because he was at the center of this secret meeting, this ex parte meeting between himself, Judge Glanville, and prosecutors in the judge's chambers. No defense counsel was present. And that led to courtroom chaos and the eventual recusal of Judge Glanville. So I want to start at the beginning here. When Brian Steele confronted Judge Glanville about what he learned, but he wouldn't reveal how he learned it.
It was told, based upon information belief, that it was told to the district attorneys that Mr. Copeland intended to plead the Fifth Amendment.
Can I interrupt you for just a second? I'm kind of disturbed because that's ex parte. All that was an ex parte conversation. How did you find out about any of that?
Based upon information
Okay,
belief.
well, listen, if you don't tell me how you got this information, then you and I are going to have some problems.
And boy, oh boy, did they have some problems, because Brian Steele discovered that the judge and the prosecution team, as I mentioned, they met with Kenneth Copeland in secret in the judge's chambers. None of this was privy to the defense. And even worse, Steele claimed that he learned in this meeting Copeland allegedly confessed to a key murder in the case, that of Donovan Thomas Jr., and that Copeland was threatened with jail time if he refused to testify. So Judge Glanville storms off the bench after this very tense moment, and when they come back on the record, he holds Brian Steele in contempt for not revealing how he found out about the ex parte meeting.
Well, I'm going to hold you in contempt. You cannot eavesdrop and get information that was not meant for you to hear at that particular point in time.
And things just continued to unravel, because this trial would later go on an 8-week-long hiatus to investigate this ex parte meeting, meaning 8 weeks where the jury didn't hear any testimony. Ultimately, another judge ended up removing Glanville from the case, writing in her order that while the court has no doubt that Judge Glanville can and would continue presiding fairly over this matter if the recusal motions were denied, the necessity of preserving the public's confidence in the judicial system weighs in favor of excusing Judge Glanville from further handling of the case. So he was removed, and when court reconvened in August, the jurors were introduced to a whole different judge.
My name is Judge Paige Reese Whitaker. Judge Juror Glanville is no longer the judge presiding over this case.
And from there, court resumed hearing testimony from Kenneth Lil Woody Copeland, who admitted that he had never really been truthful when it came to his alleged involvement in the murder of Donovan Thomas.
What's your new version? What's your truth today?
That I lied.
And that you lied about everything back in 2015?
My truth today is I lied and put the blame on others for a lot of activities. I ain't telling on myself. I ain't got nothing else to say. I don't recall. I don't know. I don't have a clue about none of this stuff. I told y'all from the start, y'all to put me in here. Like, I don't comprehend. I done told y'all that time after time. I don't know what the immunity agreement is. I'm up under so much pressure. Like, man, I don't know. I don't even know how to answer y'all question because I don't know what type. Like, I don't know. I'm trying to be as truthful as possible. And y'all keep going back into the past. I told y'all when I was talking to y'all in the back, man, I have lied. And y'all don't put me up on here telling me that I got to be truthful when I'm telling y'all. Man, I don't know. Man, I'm afraid for my life. Every time y'all call me here, I think y'all finna take my life, take my freedom. And at this point, I can't call on nobody for help. I don't know what's going on.
And now Copeland eventually concluded his testimony, and the proceedings continued to run fairly smoothly under Judge Whitaker. And then just last month, on Halloween's Eve, Young Thug would make a shocking decision that ultimately led to his freedom. He decided to plead guilty. Just prior to his sentencing, he gave a very heartfelt speech to the court.
I take full responsibility for, my crimes or my charges. I come from nothing and I made something and I didn't take full advantage of it. I'm sorry. Through these last 2.5 years of my life, you are really, truly, honestly, the best thing that has happened to me because you made everything fair for me and everybody involved on both sides. I promise you I'm 100% changing that. It's just, I'm older, I'm grown now, and it's just like, I'm smarter. It's more things to rap about. Like I've experienced a lot of good things. I experienced more bad things, but I experienced a lot of good things too.
And now here was a bigger shocker. Judge Whitaker ultimately decided against prison time. Instead, ordered that Thug serve 15 years of probation, but she did warn that if he violates his probation in any way, he could face 20 years in prison.
Even if you choose to continue to rap, you need to try to use your influence to let kids know that that is not the way to go, and that there are ways out of poverty besides hooking up with the powerful guy at the end of the street selling drugs. I want you to try to be more of the solution and less of the problem.
And just days before Young Thug's plea, 3 other co-defendants opted for plea deals. Quamarvius Nichols pleaded guilty to a RICO charge in exchange for the remainder of his charges to be dropped. Rodalius Ryan pleaded guilty to a RICO charge, and his sentence was commuted to time served, though he will remain behind bars for a murder that was separate from this case. And Marquavius Huey pled guilty to an assortment of charges, including racketeering, conspiracy, and aggravated assault charges, and he was ultimately sentenced to 9 years in prison. Now, this meant that the jury was only left with 2 remaining co-defendants, Shannon Stillwell and Diamante Kendrick. But after deliberating, they ultimately acquitted both men of an array of charges. They did convict Shannon Stillwell on a felony gun possession charge, and he was sentenced to 10 years on probation with an allowance for time served. But having said all of that, that is how this case concluded. So after all that, now I want to bring on some special guests. I am joined by actual jurors from the Young Thug RICO trial. So it's great to have you all here. Thank you so much. I am going to refer to you by juror numbers. So we have juror 387. 387, say hi. There we go. We have juror 508. 508, say hi. And we have juror 225. There we go. Okay, so first of all, I bet me saying that you still felt like you're in jury duty. You feel like you're probably still in the courtroom as I said this. All right, I have been following this for so long. I'm going to ask each of you, what was it like being a juror on the longest case in Georgia history that everybody was following? 225, I'll start with you.
Well, it was definitely an experience. I don't think any of us knew how big the trial was until like now after the fact. We had no idea that so many people were actually following the trial. But it definitely was, it was an experience. It was a chapter in my life that I won't forget. It was, yeah, it was interesting. There were highs and lows. It was a wild ride for sure.
Oh, we won't forget it either. Let me tell you, a lot of people won't forget this trial. 387, I'll throw it to you. And I was going to ask all of you guys, but did you know what was happening when you weren't in the courtroom? I mean, now, do you appreciate now what was happening, all the drama that was happening in the courtroom when you guys weren't present? 387, I'll start with you.
I mean, even with us being out, I haven't taken time out to watch all of it. I know a lot of people are very curious to know what our reactions to some of the stuff will be. So I've tried to make it a habit of just not looking. I'm not trying to see it yet. That way you get raw, uncut footage of my actual reaction.
Right.
But I mean, we knew at some point, at least if we were in the building, something could be going on. The wall's not that thick, so you can hear them get loud. You can hear kind of like the back and forth. May not be able to get all the diction right to know what was said, but you know something's going on. You just never knew at what capacity.
And Juror 508, what was it like for you? I mean, again, must have been quite an experience.
It has been. Again, this is my first time ever being a juror, so everything is new to me. Everything is new, and it's been rough. And we had days where they were good, then we had days where I was just ready to go home.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask all of you. Whoever wants to jump in first. The fact that this was so long, did you know how long it would be and how long it actually ended up being? What was that like?
Definitely didn't think it was gonna be that long. I know during our interview process, I was told at least 6 to 9 months. It would not be a year.
Yeah.
372 days later, it's something totally different. So definitely didn't anticipate what that could look like or how that would like directly affect home life balance. Especially with the beginning of the trial, you never knew exactly how long your day could be. We had a pretty good idea for the most part when we would start, at least get notice the day before or throughout the week if something was going to change, but you never know when you're going to go home.
It was long. It was hard. It was rough. Just adjusting to something that was fairly new and trying to make the best of it.
Juror 225, one of the most, I couldn't imagine what this was like for you guys, but when you think of the break this trial went on, a 2-month-long break, an 8-week hiatus, returns with a different judge. What did you make of that?
Well, I mean, honestly, we had no idea what was going on. It wasn't like we knew that the break was going to be that long and we could like plan, and like we were literally sitting at home just kind of waiting on information from the courts as to when we would come back. We would get different information, like every day it would change. They would be like, oh, you guys are coming back tomorrow. And then it's, oh, the next day and the next day. So we were kind of just on call and we were just waiting. And before we knew it, it was like 7 weeks that we had just been kind of sitting around, our life on hold. We couldn't really plan anything or do anything. And then when we got back and it was a new judge, like, obviously we couldn't ask what was going on. No one was going to tell us. Me personally, I was hoping that it wasn't anything like medical with Glanville. That's honestly what I assumed, because we knew that he had Jack the dog and we didn't know why. So but when we got back in there, it was just kind of like, all right, we're back to work. This is different, but we just got to roll with the punches and continue to listen to this trial and do our jobs.
And Juror 508, there was also a point when the defendants were whittled down. Because we know now there were those who took plea deals. Were you confused by that at any point when you saw the number of defendants going down?
I definitely was confused. I was like, hey, we left, it was 6. Now we're down to 2. So I could go on and on and on about where they went, what happened, and things of that sort, but I knew it wasn't going to get any answers to it. So we just basically, like 225 said, we just had to kind of just go in and just continue forth with whatever was presented to us.
Juror 387, look, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I've been following this case. I was confused as to what was happening with the actual evidence. I was confused as to what this argument was about, what this witness was about. I was trying to tie it into the overall case. And this is somebody, I mean, I'm an attorney. I follow this every day. Was it confusing for you? Was it confusing for any of you? I'll start with you, Juror 387, about why this witness was being called, how it ties into the overall racketeering case, or did it maybe, you being there day in and day out, did it seem very streamlined? Was it easy what the prosecution and the defense were doing?
No, definitely not. I think we only went over the indictment once, and that was back like in January 5th of 23. So trying to understand or remember what the charges were, how this kind of correlates with the other. I think in the beginning it was a lot of confusion because you started off with like experts and opening statements. And then it's like, okay, you keep hearing a name, and I'm like, who is that? I don't know how this ties in with the other one. I think for me, I just try to keep up with dates and try to do like correlations between the two, what things were relatively close to the other, if there was like a commonality of what people brought up to see, okay, this kind of ties into this. Like my notebook kind of looks like a flow chart outside of like my messiness. Like just trying to piece things together because I don't think we ever got it wasn't like an outline. There wasn't like a chart to kind of keep us organized on an alignment. We were just trying to guess in the beginning. I think closer to the end, some of the picture got clear. But it wasn't like organized or detailed enough to be like, okay, I know what I'm doing every day. It's more so like I take all this information and then trying to funnel it to see what the correlation to something else was or how something is directly affected by an event that we talked about today or 2 weeks ago. So like you kind of flip back and forth in notes. You might start something, a correlation between a witness to kind of go from there. Um, People had to kind of like figure it out on their own.
And Juror 225, I understand you were one of the jurors that actually rendered the verdict, was one of the deliberating jurors, because I believe 387 and 508, you were alternates, correct? And so
Right, correct.
225, before I go to you about the deliberations, 508, I'll go to you. We were just talking before about all the witnesses that testified, and there were some notable witnesses who were very interesting on the stand. Which were some that stood out to you and you said, wow, that's a moment right there?
For me, I really didn't have like a favorite, but like the most memorable witness was, of course, the world can pretty much tell you it was Woody.
Yeah.
But someone that we kind of gravitate more towards was Miss Sharon, the 911 operator. It was she was in there as much as we were, so I think she was a part of our team as well. But those were the ones that pretty much just kind of stood out more so for me.
387, 225, what do you think?
I was also going to say, I like Miss Ladner's also. But while we were going in there, while we were sitting in there, like I held every witness, to the same level. Like there was no one witness that I'm like, oh, this is, the key witness. Like I evaluated the evidence and the testimony that was provided by all of the witnesses equally. So I can't say that there were any favorites. Obviously there were some, some memorable moments. But when we were there, we weren't there necessarily, there for entertainment. So, we were really focused on what it was that those witnesses were bringing in their testimony.
And 387?
Memorable in the sense that of people that are kind of like leave a lasting impression. Mr. Montgomery, that sticks out to me. I think he was one of the victims. Achillean Bennett, I might have mispronounced her first name. That kind of interaction kind of stuck out to me. That's something I probably won't forget. And I wouldn't say that was because they were favorites. I think it just kind of exposed, for my personal self, some character opportunities. Um, I just feel like they could have been handled better, per se. So those are kind of like two that kind of stick out if I think about like names or processes through this process.
I guess, and I'm going to go back to 387 and 508 about your take on what the verdict was, but I want to go to 225 right now. What was the deliberation process like?
Well, I mean, thankfully, I was in there with 11 other amazing jurors. Obviously, over the course of the year, we had gotten to know each other. So I think that that kind of made the deliberation process a little bit easier. It wasn't like you were just going in with somebody that you had been sitting on a trial with for like a week. So, we were a lot more sympathetic. We had kind of already understood each other's personalities and things like that. So I think that Juror 56 did a great job as the foreman with kind of laying the foundation and setting the tone for obviously everyone showing respect to each other. We made it clear that from the beginning that if anybody had any questions, like we were a team, and even if it was just one person, we would all go out there so that that one person could get clarity on the evidence. Most of like we took the counts one by one, took a vote, an initial vote, and the majority of the room was undecided because most people just said, we want to talk about it. Like, we don't want to make a decision just yet. Like, let's hear other people's opinions on where they stand. So we really collaborated, went through evidence together, explained things to one another that other people may have been confused about. And it was a team effort. We agreed that we would be in there as long as we needed to be in there. So it wasn't terrible. We got along. There were a couple of intense moments, but then we always pulled it back and remembered why we were there and the purpose, and we really wanted to just focus on the evidence that was provided.
What was the problem in the prosecution's case, you think?
I just think that the evidence, like there was a lot of evidence that was provided, but something that we did discuss during deliberations is that the evidence that we may have needed to come up with a different verdict was not there. We had a lot of evidence, and a lot of it didn't necessarily seem to mean much to a lot of the jurors, and the things that we really wanted to see was not there. So the evidence was definitely something that I think that they could have done better with. And it also what 387 said as far as like just the organization of it all, it was very hard to follow. So I think that it could have been streamlined, it could have been organized better, they could have told a better story to kind of pull everything together. That was definitely an area where I think that they may have dropped the ball.
I'm going to ask 387 and 508 if you agree with the verdict. So 508, I'll start with you. Do you agree with what 225, her description of these events and her perception of the prosecution? Do you agree with the verdict with respect to those two defendants?
I do. I definitely agree with the verdict because pretty much while we were there, we did see the same evidence. We saw the same things. So I do agree with what she said. It was just, the evidence was presented, but everything wasn't connecting for me. So I definitely agree with it.
387?
I'm in agreement. I think understanding that to say that somebody would have had to be guilty, there not being any doubt. And I think that's probably the biggest hang up, at least for my personal self. There were holes, there were opportunities, there was some level of doubt. So it wasn't like I wouldn't have been able to say that they were guilty with conviction.
Let me ask you this. As you know, you didn't have to decide Young Thug's guilt or not because he ended up taking a deal. Would anyone have found him guilty?
Can't say that in confidence. For the simple fact that we don't know how much more information would have been provided.
Right.
Don't really remember his charges. Like I said, like the indictment, we only heard it once, and that was January. Trial started in November. I don't think we got into like the real meat of the trial until January the following year. So like for the most part, I know for myself before we got released for being alternates, that was the last time. That was the next time we actually heard what they were being charged for at closing. I don't know what that opportunity could have been.
225?
I mean, I agree. I can't say whether or not we would have found a conviction or not based on the fact that other than the RICO, we knew that they all had the RICO charge. I'm not sure if, I don't even know what the other charges were, to be honest. And then also, I can't say if there would have been a conviction because again there were 11 other individuals that were in the room with me, so it would have been a collective decision based on everything that had been considered. So I can't say. I will say that learning after the fact that everybody took pleas, I do think that they did what they thought was in their best interest. So
Yeah, and 508, I'll throw it to you too, and also the fact that, as I'm sure you know, Young Thug was not sentenced to prison, probation, so he walked away a free man. Your thoughts on what role he may or may not have played in this?
I guess that's not up for me to kind of have an answer for, because I really don't know. If I was basing it off, again, the evidence that was presented, I can't say he was. I can't say he, wasn't. So that was our biggest thing, was just kind of focusing on the evidence and what we knew. Because like both jurors said, we never really knew what everyone was charged with. Of course, we did know that it was RICO, one of them. And they did mention it to us at the very beginning of the case. And that was pretty much like before the selection of being a juror. So, yeah.
Yeah. And 508, and I'll ask this about the 387. Was it frustrating for you that after all that time you were an alternate and couldn't get into the deliberations?
It definitely was not frustrating at all.
Really?
It was,
No.
yeah. I did want to be there and just kind of support, but the law is we have to be removed. And we did want to be there when they came out with the verdict, but unfortunately we wasn't. But they did what they saw that was presented as far as the evidence goes. So
387, you look like you agree.
I definitely agree. I mean, a lot of people, from what I've
Sorry,
seen,
225. Sorry, you were one of the ones that had to deliberate, but 387, you feel the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to be a fly on the wall. Like, I was very interested to kind of hear everybody's opinion. Because granted, we're not supposed to discuss the case behind doors. During the whole process, you can't deliberate until we can deliberate. So I wanted to be like a fly on the wall, but like to actually engage in the conversation or have to go through the process of helping somebody understand or probably like rewatch any form of evidence I really didn't want to participate.
they can have it.
They can
What's
have it.
that?
They got it.
I'm happy that
They can have it.
actually deliberating because
Sure.
I wouldn't have wanted to sit there for a year and then like I would have felt like I was cheated. Like I had to sit there for a year. I was required to sit there for a year and listen to all of this. Like I'm going to see this thing through because otherwise it would have felt like a year wasted for nothing and my voice couldn't be heard. So
By the way, are you guys all friends now? Like, what's that bond after serving? Not, by the way, I've served jury duty before. It could be like a couple days, could be 2 weeks. To be together for that long, are you guys all friends?
I'm so
We are.
jealous that you said a couple weeks though. Let's talk about that first. I'm very jealous. A couple weeks for jury
Well,
duty? We
to
don't
be
even know what
honest,
that
it
is.
was not a trial. It was a grand jury, so you only hear like a little bit of evidence about a few different cases. But no, it wasn't a year. I mean, so 387. I'll start with you. What's the bond like?
Amongst the three of us, I think it's very close.
Good.
We're like sisters at this point. We volunteer as aunties. We chime in. We send people off to college. And we go to basketball games. We go to birthday parties. It kind of just depends on what's going on. I mean, granted, I think the commonality between the three of us is we were mothers. Like we had grade school children when this kind of started. One of us has gone on to go to college. I mean, but there's still three behind, right? As far as if I think about the dynamic of the rest of the group, there are relationships out of that as well. There are some people that will probably like check in and see how you doing. Touch base. Would I say hang out? Maybe not with everybody. But it's not because of love lost. I think the dynamic of a jury of your peers puts into perspective there's age differences. All of us are kind of like in different stages of life. So it may be like highs and lows. It's like the older coworker that, you see when I'm at work. I don't see you when I leave.
Yeah.
It's one of those type things.
It's interesting, as you said, how long this trial is. For a second, I thought it was we started with young children. By the end of the trial, they're now off in college and they're married. So it's like, that's how long it took. But 508, you feel the same way, right?
Yes, I definitely feel like it's a sisterhood. And I'm appreciative of it. I think that's the good thing that we did get out of this whole ordeal. We definitely have a bond.
And look, 225, you were in the deliberation room, which can get, as you said, can get intense in times. Maybe you go in with friendships. It might not leave that the same way, but how do you feel about it with 387, 508, and your other jurors?
Well, like they said, with these two, definitely there's a sisterhood there. There's a bond that will go forward after this trial. Other people that were in there, I mean,
I got it. I got it.
like they said, there were there were some really good people on the jury. I think the biggest thing, like 387 said, was just like the age dynamics. We were actually, with the exception of one male, we were the youngest in there. So, we were in different stages of life and things like that. So I do still really like all of the jurors, well, most of them. And I do think that just like we form bonds, there's probably some bonds that have been formed between some of the other jurors amongst themselves, based on their similarities and commonalities. So I think that this trial probably helped formulate a few different types of friendships amongst the jurors. Sorry.
Well, listen, 387, 508, 225, you are exactly what the criminal justice system needs. Jurors exactly like you. You took this obligation, this responsibility to heart. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. You carefully considered the evidence, and you were respectful of the process and each other. And it's just such a great thing to see. I'm very proud as a lawyer to see this myself. So thank you so much for not only coming on here, thank you for the service that you did, because I know this was not easy. Not everybody gets a chance to do this, and not a lot of people would want it, but to sit on a jury this long, really, I know it's not easy. So thank you to all three of you. Really, really appreciate it. You all should be very proud of yourself, and I'm so happy that you now have formed this bond. So that's great.
Thank you. Thank you. And we did also want to say, before we leave, we always keep reiterating that we definitely have sympathy for the victims. We have not, it's not lost upon us that there were lives lost and people that were hurt and impacted. And we do send our deepest condolences to everyone that was impacted by instances that we were there to listen to the evidence on. Again, we based our decisions solely on the evidence, but we never lost sight that there were real victims. We saw some in court. We saw some pretty graphic pictures of people that are no longer with us. And that was definitely something that we want to make sure that everyone knows, that we definitely those families are in our prayers and our thoughts, and we do hope that they are able to get the justice that they deserve.
Very well said. I appreciate you saying that. And look, that's the trial process. That's the way it is. It's not based on emotions. It's not based on what should happen. It's based on the evidence and the facts and the law. So really appreciate you saying that. 387, 508, 225. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.